Well, thank you very much, Paul, and colleagues, welcome back to the second day of our virtual visit to Poland. I'm John Speller. I'm a member of the British delegation. I'm also the Vice Chairman of the House of Commons Parliament Defence Committee, rather our Select Committee, the equivalent of committees in the United States, but with less power and money. And I was also previously a Minister for the Armed Forces in the Labour government and recently elected chair of the subcommittee here on transition and development. In fact, this is my first subcommittee meeting in that capacity and delighted to be with you all for today's discussions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome after a short break. Let me introduce our next speaker, who is Mr. Maciej Witucki, the president of the Leviathan Confederation, leading and most important business organization representing the interest of employers in Poland and in the European Union. Mr. Maciej Witucki is inter alia since 2009 the member of the board of directors of the Atlantic Council of the United States, the leading American think tank dedicated to initiate debates on international politics and to shape policy choices and strategies to create a more free, secure and prosperous world. And thank you, Maciej, for your presence, and let me give you a floor.
For this invitation. Hopefully you can hear me. And thank you for the challenge. I must tell you that after a year of a pandemic, I discovered a new IT platform to communicate, which is a kind of discovery, and it gives me some new energy and new tensions while trying to connect with you. So it shows that we have a new kind of challenges in front of us, despite of the fact that we are fighting this new situation already for 12 months. This new platform is permanently alerting me that my perfect Wi-Fi connection is unstable. So I hope that despite of the message on my screen, you can hear me correctly. So with all those excitements provided by the technology, as I understand, I'm supposed to introduce the subject of the challenges we have in front of us from the employer's perspective, from the company perspective. So. I will try to do so. I have my speech prepared and sent to the translators. I will try to keep as much as possible to the notes I have, but if you allow me, I will have also I will take some freedom to somehow to improvise on this on those points of challenges, because I really believe that in front of us we have a new era, a new period of improvisation. The instabilities we have been knew in this world for last years, they have been somehow amplified by the pandemic. In the same time, some future developments we have been expecting for years, like remote working, the digitalization of our workplace, but also of our lifestyles. All of those accelerated suddenly in the last 12 months. So we will have to learn how to improvise, including our translators on this conference floor. So sorry for the translators, but I will somehow try to keep you awake, because I know that the challenge is also not only the platform, but also that I'm the last speaker of the 2 days conference. So it's always a kind of challenge. So to start with a quote, so our Nobel Prize winner, Mrs. Olga Tokarczuk, who received this award a year ago, when she spoke about the modern world, she said that today we have a problem, and the problem is to find a narrative for the future, but also is to find a narrative for today, for now. So those words pronunciated in Stockholm a year ago, they are even more important today and even more true today. We have this ultra-fast transformation of the world everywhere. We have this, as you said, the enormity of the information. Instead of unifying, is differentiating us, illuminates and encloses in bubbles, creates a multitude of stories which are incompatible with each other, even hostile to each other. So all those elements are even more valid today when the pandemic accelerates many of the transformation in the world in both directions, by the way, the positive and the negative ones. So, as Michał said, I'm the president of the largest organization of employers in Poland. We have more than 4,000 companies. We provide a dialogue with the administration. We give opinions and propose law changes. We are analyzing the current situations. During the first lockdown in Poland in March 2020, when the government started to prepare for the companies the first aid plans, our activity increased even more. We are in constant contact with the administration. We propose new provisions. We inform entrepreneurs how they can deal with the new situation. And today we speak with the government about the vaccination processes to accelerate the exit of this situation. A year ago, obviously, we knew much less than we know today, and any help was a value then. And today we have a bit of more of experience, but new waves of the pandemic, new complexities, not only the medical virus, but also the economical virus, are touching us and are touching the Polish economies. At the same time, we are quite lucky in Poland. The Polish economy shows itself quite or I'd say much more resilient than the majority of the European economies. It showed up to be less dependent on our German neighbors than we thought, because our first idea was that we are, for many years, that we are somehow completely aligned in our growth path to the German economy. During this crisis, Polish companies, Polish small and medium companies, Polish entrepreneurs, and the spirit of the entrepreneurship of Poles built during the communist period, but built also during the 30 years of the transformation, helped us to pass this difficult period. Well, it's not yet finished, but somehow pass the majority of it with quite, I would say, positive outcome compared, obviously, economically to majority of European countries. Now the issue, it's not about summing up the last 12 months, which have been in the same time very dramatic on the people's perspective and on the healthcare perspective and number of casualties. It's, as I understand, the idea was that I introduced the speech about the future, and unfortunately my speech about the future will not be original. Obviously, in Poland, as in many majority of all European countries, the priorities are basically the same. Basically, they are about the digitalization and energy transformation. Especially in Poland, the energy is an important element because obviously we have our energy based on coal. And although the share of the renewable energy, especially photovoltaics, is systematically growing. But I will start with digitalization. I spent last dozen of years of my career within this digital concept. So obviously, digital industry. So obviously, the pandemic showed us to which extent the digital is important, and showed us also to which extent the digital is fragile. So obviously, we are calling to the government, and we are calling also to the European community, because Leviathan is also very active within the Business Europe community. So we're calling to the Commission to accelerate the transformation. So Polish government, we are calling for more involvement in the digital education. And this is the most important element, because we believe that the connectivity can be provided in majority by the private investors, while the digital education, digital administration, the services supporting the digital transformation of the administration and of the enterprises have to be dealt with the government. We have in Poland a good level of usage. So mobile broadband is very highly used in Poland, and the quality of service is good, and the prices are competitive. Still, we need to develop the very high-speed broadband through the fiber optics, and here Poland has still the improvement to be done. 15% of the Polish population has not yet access to the very high-speed broadband, so 15. So we need this population to get connected. To get connected with a decent with the decent speeds to avoid the digital exclusion, which is a phenomenon known now everywhere in the world. We need obviously to improve, and I will repeat it several times, that we need more digital skills. We have obviously in Poland more and more ICT specialists and ICT graduates, but the number still remains below the EU average. So Polish enterprises, enterprise I represent, they have a positive attitude to the new technologies, and this technology, this tendency have been seen in the very first days of the pandemic. We've seen companies passing to the remote activity within a weekend, and I can give examples of 10,000 employers being set up remotely with remote desktops within a weekend in one of the Polish ICT companies. According to the Digital Use Index, 60% of enterprises in Poland are very digitalized, where the EU average is 39%, but only 11% are highly digitalized, when the average in Europe is 26%. So we have companies, a huge number of companies already bought into the digital sphere, but the level of the very highly digitalized companies and the level of the very highly robotized companies is still too low. So obviously an opportunity, the European funds, the 21-27 perspective, and the national reconstruction plan, under which 20% of the funds will be allocated, hopefully will be allocated to the digital economy. Now, what we need from the government is again to support the infrastructure. The infrastructure, as I said, which will be most probably built in its majority, is already the case, by the private companies. So state should concentrate on the support functions, on the education, should support eventually on the subsidies in the white zones where the commercial connectivity it's not possible, but definitely not in the infrastructure areas. We have today some tendencies to come back to the old days of the national operators, of the recreation of the national telecom assets. We understand the necessity of having some highly securitized communication network for the administration or for some security activities, but definitely we believe that in Poland we have been demonstrating how efficient we can be in building the high-speed connectivity with the private investment, and how quickly we can buy into the adoption of our citizens towards those technologies. What is important today is to increase the funds to improve the digital competences. And I believe this is a challenge to all of us. We have to allocate more money to educate our populations, all populations, starting from the youngsters, because usage of the social medias is not synonymous of digital skills, and even more for the 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus populations. It's not mission impossible. It's absolutely doable. We see examples where digital skills can be built within the populations being excluded in the past. So we really believe that in our national recovery plans, and including in Poland, but also in other European countries, we should push this element of digital skills, not only for the professional activity of our citizens, but also, I would say, for the development of our economies, because we need digital workers, but we need also digital consumers, and I would say educated digital consumers. So we really believe there's this function of exclusion, and I would say educational exclusion, is something which has to be pushed. The other element of digitalization is also to keep it green, because obviously this growing demand for digital, this growing demand for data usage, it is impacting also the climate. So the ICT sector should be involved in the planning of the climate policy. Money for digital innovation should support the reduction of emission, and governments should favor the investments in green digital transformation at the level of the strategy, legislation, but also by designating the EU support tools as a part of the cohesion policy and of the national recovery plans. So the ICT industry understands this need. So we have an effort at the level of our companies, enterprises being members of Leviathan. But once again, it has to be supported, especially at the energy efficiency level. Second element of the linked with the digital is obviously the cybersecurity. So we clearly see those days with this increasing digitalization how fragile it is. It brings great fruits for our societies. It helped our economies to resist to the COVID virus, but we see at the same time how fragile can be this ecosystem if we do not push our joint efforts on the cybersecurity. And cybersecurity starting again by the education of the users, because majority of the threats are not coming from the famous, I would say, hardware bridges, but it comes from the users, not educated enough users. So the education is the number one for us as it goes for the cybersecurity. And the second element is the cybersecurity in the cooperation between the private and the public sector. I have had once in my Atlantic Council life a long discussion with US generals about the evolution of the concept of security. Security used to be a monopoly of the state. Obviously, no private company, hopefully in the reasonable democracies, owns tanks or airplane carriers or fighters. But in those days of cybersecurity, this monopoly of the state is not existing anymore. And I would even take a risky statement of saying that in many dimensions, the privately owned cybersecurity may be today in many countries more efficient than the one which is built by the states. So I really believe that if we care, all of us, we care about cybersecurity, and obviously we do, we should work together on finding the mechanism of joining the efforts, of joining the investments, and somehow aligning the strategies and policies between the private sector and the public sector in the joint fight against the cybersecurity at all levels. So this is a new paradigm we have to build. This period of state monopoly on the defense is, in my opinion, in my private opinion, absolutely outdated as we speak. If we speak about the area of the cybersecurity. So here again, investments are needed. Here again, new policies, new paradigms, new schemes of cooperation between again state and the private sector are to be built in order to gain efficiency, because we see in the business area, in the financial area, in the state security area, how fragile we may be. So obviously the next element and the last element of my speech about the threats, so we have digital, we have the security linked with the digital, is obviously the energy. So this climate neutrality, it's a set up target. It's a target which is accepted across Europe. It's a target which is accepted across also the Polish community. And I will speak almost not only about the Polish business community, which has no doubts that this is a threat, because we have to be up to speed for 2050, but it's also an opportunity because new businesses can be and should be developed, and new areas could be of competence and of business could be built in Europe around this green transformation. It's also, I would say, officially accepted across our governments. I'm always quoting an example of how accelerated is the green understanding in Poland by using an anecdote of President of our Republic, who 2 years ago had been announcing 200 years of Polish coal, while after 2 years he's only speaking about 30 years. So it's a factor 7 acceleration after 2 years, and it shows you to which extent the politicians may also accelerate when they are being pushed by the citizens, because I think that this green concept is not only understood by Polish companies, but is also very widely understood by the Polish as well European population. So here this pressure will be growing. We have the funds which are being guaranteed to us across the National Recovery Plan. We have the funds in the new in the new European seven-year budget. So Poland will all obviously embrace it. In this green area, as I said, it's a great chance. I don't really believe that in Europe we still have a capability to build the dreams. If you remember the Lisbon strategy, we have been dreaming about building European Facebooks and European Googles. With all respect, those positions are already occupied. Today, they are still positions to be held, the positions to be built in the green transformation areas. They are still the blue oceans from this famous management book, the blue oceans of new businesses and new global positions in the energy transformation area, in the green energy area. And here we have opportunities for Western countries. Here we have opportunities where Europe and the transatlantic community can still take positions which are not yet occupied by our competitors. So I would really believe that as a Confederation Leviathan, but also I believe as a Polish companies community, that this green transformation is a chance, it's an opportunity to build new green global champions, and we are ready to run this race. Speaking now for a while, it's not my domain of competence, so I will not be long on this one. Obviously, we have a complicated international picture. We have been, at the beginning of the pandemic, we have been wondering about shortening the logistic chains. We have been wondering about, and I would say even quoting the politicians and us entrepreneurs who have been speaking about the necessity to repatriate activities back to the Western world, to rebuild our industrial sovereignty. Suddenly, it's a kind of expression which is quite fashionable today, at least in Europe. It seems to be more complicated than we thought 12 months ago or 10 months ago. It's still a necessity. We're still working on it. We still hope that some areas will be repatriated. At least the critical activities could be repatriated back to the Western world with the benefits to our local companies. But still, the economic laws and the laws of demand and the laws of offers are unchanged, remain unchanged. We cannot build the sovereignty regardless of the price on the consumer side. So we have to be smart there, but we have the end of the pandemic, the hopeful end of the pandemic, in at least this wave, in a few weeks, not longer than a few months. Hopefully it will not close the debate of which activities should be repatriated back to Europe, which activities should be reintegrated in our activities. In our scope of industrial activities in Europe. So those are the challenges which we are actively working on. Poland is ready, again, with the spirit of entrepreneurship, with the spirit of private businesses being extremely agile, extremely resilient. Again, our numbers, with numbers we see today of the growth, the pre-COVID growth, and the current 12 months of the resilience, they are coming from this capacity of adapting to the difficult conditions. We see that the perspectives, the numbers which are being given for Poland for the incoming months are as well superior to the ones, the growth rates are superior to the ones which are being announced to our Western neighbors. So we are ready to embrace this new wave of this new world, the new world which in the last 12 months integrated many of the activities we thought for a long time being a science fiction. So we work remotely, we have remote conferences. Obviously, I would still prefer from time to time to meet with you, and I would prefer to sit with you and to discuss directly. So hopefully the remote will not replace completely the old days activities, but a lot have been changing in the 12 months. A lot of those changes, we embrace them. We are already adopting and building new business models. And we are very happy to enjoy this transformation. Obviously, with the element of security, with the element of the new instabilities which appeared, and again they appeared in the digital, they appeared in the climate. So here we need, as I spoke concerning the cybersecurity, we have to find new models. We have to find the models where what used to be a monopoly of the state will somehow be shared, or at least discussed with the private sector, and again, the private sector would have to learn how to deal with those new challenges, and how to integrate some elements of what used to be a state monopoly in our day-to-day activity, because we are more linked than 12 months ago, and not only because states helped us to survive, helped the businesses to survive across the world, but also the new challenge, also because the new challenges, they are requesting in new ways of cooperation between us. So we are very happy to discuss it, and Leviathan is happy to discuss it at the Polish level, at the European level, but also at the transatlantic level, where the solution still are to be discovered, because the challenges are only piling up. But I'm quite optimistic. I'm an engineer from training. I love sci-fi books in the past, and this sci-fi is becoming reality today. So very excited about it, and I'm still somehow confident about the fact that we'll be overcoming this crisis, and this crisis will become an opportunity to all of us. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see at this point, well, let's see, I'm going to check on the request. Yes, we have a question from Mr. Kalnins from Latvia. So I turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Collins, I think we are waiting for you to come in, but thank you very much, Mr. Witucci, for that excellent contribution, much and very thought-provoking as well. And I think our first speaker is going to come in, first respondent is going to come in on that.
I totally agree. That was fascinating. You covered a wide territory, and I think all of it was very relevant. I'm going to focus just on one specific issue. Talking about cybersecurity and IT, and that is 5G technology. What is the status of 5G technology in Poland right now, either legally or politically, especially in dealing with sources like Huawei? And I think this raises also the issue that you brought up about state versus private interests, because I think in several European countries, the state may have one view about what is a secure supplier, but private interests are looking more at the profit line. So I'd like to hear your views about this in Poland.
Yeah, I will start by being personal on this one, because I used to run Orange in Poland for 7 years, so the largest telecom operator in the country. And to give you an example, just to come up with the idea, when I swapped the 4G network to Huawei, at the same time, I swapped the entire core network to Cisco. Sorry for quoting the names, but that was my approach at that time, and I still somehow like my approach from a few years ago. But basically, this is somehow the approach of the private sector in Poland. The majority of the sector thinks that yes, we have to keep a level of security. And we have to keep what is strategic somehow controlled by ourselves. But in the same time, I'm not sure that we are ready to somehow give up the level of prices, because it will be the sovereignty, this complete sovereignty and this immediate sovereignty will be maybe very expensive. And Poland with Romania are the two cheapest country of internet I ever seen in Europe. So we are the two cheapest countries in Europe, not even speaking about the United States. So you cannot keep this price for the consumers if suddenly you want to immediately swap to the very sovereign technologies. So the approach, and there is a difference obviously between this private sector approach of yes, we want to guarantee the security, but we don't want somehow to comply automatically to the political visions. I'm always quoting this image of politicians are speaking about this autonomous car chasing us at the order of Kamerad Kshi in the streets of Warsaw. With all respect, the autonomous cars, they will be on our streets of Warsaw when the 7G will be connected on our towers. So speaking about it in 2021, somehow it's a part of the of the political debate more than about the technical reality. So yes, there's an important. I think the debate was very difficult a year and a half ago. Today there's some flexibility. So to give you the concrete example, the current draft law on the cybersecurity speaks about the phase out of the so-called uncertified technologies within a period of 5 years, still to be negotiated, because I think that the sector wanted to have a swap period of 7 years if the technology is being qualified as unsecure. If this law is being adopted, then we'll have a list of unsecure technologies, and then there will be a period of 5 years to swap the technology out of the network, which is a reasonable consensus. In practice, it's a bit more complicated, but because at the very last moment, sorry for the details, but the Polish government added to the same law, draft of law, the creation of the national operator. So a kind of state-controlled independent operator for not very defined purposes. So it complicates the adoption of the law. But the approach is much more, I would say, reasonable, and the discussions are much more flexible than they used to be a year ago. I'm not sure about what would be the output of it, but the position of the industry is, let's be pragmatic, let's keep secure what is the core, and that's for sure. For the access networks, etc., let's be quite pragmatic, because we have millions of consumers enjoying the cheapest internet in Europe, and we cannot inform them tomorrow that the prices will increase because we have been banned to use some equipment.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I do not see another question from the floor at this point.
Well, could I just pose a question there? Because, of course, companies have to look to their bottom line. They're properly competitive, and otherwise they'd be faced with competition regulation. But equally, the Chinese and other countries understand that, and therefore may well be subsidizing very heavily the sale until such time, as with solar, as with electric batteries, they have basically demolished our own industry. And the pandemic has shown the danger of not having manufacturing capability in countries in a whole range of areas. So governments surely rightly have to take a strategic view as to where their interests as to where the long-term interests of the country lie. And indeed, if they do manage to ramp up manufacturing, while for each individual company it may make sense, creating a capacity may actually, obviously, on the learning and production curve, enable you to narrow that margin, particularly if it's the genuine margin, rather than the heavily subsidized either by companies or indeed by state entities.
Yeah, absolutely. In the sense of the ramp-up, and I think that there are two elements on which we fully agree. One is, if possible, to create as much as possible a common European framework, but not one-to-one, because if it's a completely common European framework, it will take years, and it will be too long. But somehow a framework. And then I think that the ramp-up is the word which is the most appropriate, in the sense of we cannot, because the first drafts was basically, let's ban Chinese equipment, let's go to the so-called Western producers, by the way, coming from Asia, and let's simplify the law. In this case, obviously, we will have a shock to the consumers. There are some European countries which are already adopting the regulations with a progressive increase or rather progressive decrease, and I think this is something where we can somehow prepare the consumers, prepare the companies, and somehow prepare our local producers progressively to the swap of the competences, and then live with a kind of hybrid model. With all respect, I really believe, and that's why I quoted my experience from years ago about let's defend what is critical. And let's defend the area of knowledge and the area of technology, of the security, which are critical. I think that many of the activities are not really the activities creating such a big, I would say, industrial value for us. So they may be still kept with the low end and low cost countries, not necessarily only Chinese, because today it's about Chinese, but it's about the entire Asia. Because if we speak about the competition tomorrow, the competition from I don't know, Vietnam or Korea, it's also a competition. Obviously, it's a different. In the case of Korea, it's a different world. It's a comparable like-to-like margin, so we can obviously deal with it with a more transparent way. But I really believe that this approach, and that's why I like quite well the current pragmatic approach of the Polish administration, which is let's give us some time, let's set up the frame, let's set up the timing, and let's without shocking the consumers and the companies. Let's have a solution aiming a change for a few years in front of us.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to come in, Paul?
No, I see we have no more up,
Okay.
on the request list, so I think it's up to you to wrap it up.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you certainly for that contribution. I think that you've probably stunned people into silence for a minute, but I suspect the questions will come after they leave the meeting. But this does conclude the joint meeting of the Subcommittee on Transition and Development and also the Subcommittee on NATO Partnerships. Once again, we'd like to thank our Polish host, the head of the delegation, Bismilaw Czarnecki, our rapporteur, Michael Scherber, and also the secretary of the delegation, because we should always remember those who do the work behind the scenes for the politicians, Artur Zeniski, and his colleagues for all their hard work in putting together and hosting these meetings. And also on behalf of everyone, can I extend a special thanks to the staff of the NATO PA for their work over recent weeks and months in preparing these meetings, and also for those operating the Kudo program behind the scenes today. I don't know what was happening to your connection. I've got the same sign up that it's unstable, but fortunately it's managed to hold enough. I'd like to thank our speakers for taking the time to share their expertise with us, and of course thanks to my co-chair for these meetings, Carl Lammers, and our members for their thoughtful participation during the proceedings. Finally, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to express our collective appreciation once again to our interpreters, who as usual do a magnificent job in allowing us to communicate with each other so effectively. And with that, I now adjourn this joint meeting, and no doubt we will all be communicating with each other in the spring conference. Thank you very much.